My stepmother was my birth mother's best friend. From the day she walked into our house, everyone said I was lucky to have one more person who would love me like her own daughter. To be fair, she really did seem that way at first, always gentle, always doting, always giving me the best of everything. She spoiled me so much I became reckless and self-indulgent, until my dad started to lose hope in me. Then he turned and poured all his effort into raising her own daughter. After my dad, Daniel, passed away in my previous life, my stepmother, Marian, no longer bothered with her kind and gentle mask. She swallowed all of my dad's assets whole, and I was kicked out of the house in the middle of a night when the snow was falling thick and heavy. In the freezing cold that cut into my bones, I collapsed on an empty street, my heart overflowing with hatred. When I opened my eyes again, I realized I had gone back to when I was 16, right before the summer break after my first year of high school. Marian stood in front of me, her eyes full of concern, her voice soft and warm. "Don't mind your dad. Aunt Marian supports you in chasing music." I stared at the wad of cash in her hand, stunned, as memories from my previous life rushed back like a cold wind. That summer, all I had in my head were idols and dreams of the stage. Dad wanted me to attend extra classes. I insisted on pursuing music. After one huge argument, I took the money Marian gave me and went alone to City S in search of a music academy, and ended up losing everything. Now, everything was starting all over again. I took the money from her, trying hard to keep my face calm as the corner of my lips lifted slightly. "Thank you, Aunt Marian." But inside, I had only one thought: everything she owed me in my last life, I would take back, little by little. That night, I saw my dad again. Daniel was bent over at the door, changing his slippers. The warm yellow light from the living room shone over his familiar figure, so gentle it made my heart clench. The hair at his temples was still black. There were no 4 tubes on him, no weak and fading breath like the last time I saw him. "Dad." My voice trembled, stuck in my throat. He paused, turned his head, his brows knitting together. "What kind of act are you pulling now? You stay home and study properly this summer. As for learning music, stop dreaming." Just that one simple sentence, and I couldn't stop my tears from falling. In my previous life, Marian had deliberately hidden the fact that he was sick. By the time I found out, everything was already too late. When I rushed into the hospital and saw Daniel lying motionless among cold machines, it felt like my whole world had collapsed. I cried until my voice broke, begging the doctors to save him. I went to Lingshan Temple and climbed 5,000 steps, bowing every 3 steps and kneeling every one, until I fainted, just praying that I could trade my life for his. I said I was wrong, that I was wrong to trust the wrong people, wrong to run away from home, wrong for hurting him so deeply. But he still lay there, silent, never answering me again. And now, he was right in front of me, still able to scold me, still able to get mad. Just that alone made me feel grateful for this fate. From the kitchen, Marian came out, her voice honey-sweet. "See? You've made the girl cry. Come wash your hands, it's time to eat." She was just like before, expert at pretending, careful with every word and gesture. On the table were several of my favorite dishes, not a bit less attentive than in my previous life. Everything was exactly the same as back then, except this time, I was fully awake, watching it all clearly. Dad picked up a piece of braised pork rib and placed it in my bowl, his voice stern. "You've rested enough this summer. Go to the tutoring center tomorrow." And about music, he stopped, his gaze turning cold. "I'm not paying for that." Marian glanced at me, the smile still on her face, but her eyes clearly signaled, "Don't argue, just go along with it for now." But I was no longer that naive, easily coaxed 16-year-old. I set my chopsticks down and said evenly, "I don't need Dad's money." Then I took out the wad of cash Marian had just given me and slapped it down on the table. The sharp smack rang out in the tense air like a snapped string. Aunt Marian already gave this to me. She said she'd support me in pursuing music. She even bought my train ticket to City S for tomorrow. The room went quiet for a beat. Dad and Marian's expressions changed at the same time. Marian's eyes widened, feigning panic. Daniel's face flushed red as his voice dropped low and dangerous. Marian, what the hell is wrong with you? Tears quickly welled up in her eyes as she choked out, full of wronged innocence. I just think Nina sings really well. I don't want her to feel too restricted. It's hard enough being a stepmother. I used my own private savings to help her, is that wrong? Same tone, same pitiful look, the same tired performance. I sat quietly, watching the familiar scene unfold, feeling only bitter amusement. If they wanted to see me as a rebellious daughter, fine. I didn't need to pretend to be obedient anymore. Dad, I looked up and smiled, my voice soft but sharp as a blade. Aunt Marian is much more generous than you. She can casually pull out 10,000 yuan of her own money so I can chase a dream you've always opposed. I'm 16 already, I'm not a little kid. I'm not Luna. I can take care of myself in City S. Dad's face darkened further. That last sentence stabbed straight into his pride. You still know you're only 16. You're not even legally an adult yet. Then he turned to Marian, still seething. Look at her. In what way does this look like a sensible kid? Spoiling her like this, what are you trying to do? Would you dare let Luna go off on her own like that? I stayed put, quietly enjoying the scene. Dad exploding, Marian fake crying, the house full of sighs and accusations. And as if to close the act, Dad finally said that since she had so much private money, there was no need for him to give her extra living expenses every month anymore. Nice. Marian's expression instantly darkened, turning black like ink. As for me, I felt oddly satisfied. After venting his anger, Daniel rubbed his temples, his voice dropping. Being a star isn't as easy as you think. And you don't have any talent for it. In my previous life, I heard that line countless times, and every time it felt like a knife. Back then I was still young and naive, believing that as long as I had a dream, the whole world would help me realize it. Marian and Luna always told me I sang beautifully, that my voice was a gift from heaven, born to stand under the spotlight. I believed them. Until all that flattery and youthful illusion pushed me straight into the abyss. Because down there, a voice alone is never enough. You also need connections, money, and things someone like me could never touch no matter how hard I tried. I paid for that lesson with my entire youth. Just as I was getting lost in these thoughts, Luna, who had been quiet this whole time, suddenly looked up and said softly, "Uncle, Nina really does sing very well. Everyone at school says so." It sounded like she was defending me, but to my dad's ears, those words were just fuel on the fire. His face darkened, and he slammed his palm on the table. "Whatever the case, you're going to that tutoring center tomorrow. I won't have you fooling around singing all day." The next day was Saturday. Dad went to work early, so early he didn't even have time for breakfast. I stood by the window and watched his back disappear down the narrow street, my chest tightening. In my previous life, I'd once blamed him for not keeping his promises, to take me to a concert, to show up at some performance, only to forget because of work. Now I finally understood. He was just a father struggling to support a family, with no room left for luxuries. The moment he left, my bedroom door flew open. Marian walked in, the exhaustion from last night's scolding still written on her face. "Your dad really let me have it yesterday," she sighed, then pulled a bank card from her pocket. Her tone grew gentle again. "This is the money I saved before I married him. If you really want to chase your dream, I'll help you. But next time you talk, think carefully first. Don't drag me into it as your shield." Right after that, Luna poked her head in from the hallway, smiling sweetly. "Let me help you pack, or you'll miss your train." I curled my lips. "So eager to get rid of me, are you?" In my previous life, I had once dragged my suitcase out of this house with my head full of fantasies, thinking that if I succeeded and came back famous, Dad would be proud, and slowly he would come to understand and support me. But Dad and we were both stubborn. Both convinced we were right. Add a stepmother who was skilled at sowing discord on one side, and a reckless, immature me on the other. Once misunderstanding took root, familial love became the most luxurious thing in the world. Luna bent over, carefully folding my clothes into the suitcase. I watched her, feeling only a cold emptiness inside, even as my lips curled into a faint smile. This time, no one would be able to drive me away from my dad again. I flicked my wrist, knocking the suitcase aside with a cold voice. No need to pack. I'm not going. Both Marian and Luna froze. A glint flashed through Luna's eyes, tinged with mockery. Didn't you say you wanted to stand beside your idol? To sing on stage with them? Yeah, I said, the corners of my mouth lifting slightly. I did say that. But those idols I once called my light? Later they got exposed for fraud and vanished from the industry. As for me, my youth was buried under scandals and humiliation. When it was over, I had nothing. Just a ridiculous dream in exchange for my wasted youth. So I changed my mind. I added lazily, that old man is fighting it tooth and nail, isn't he? Just coax him for now, we'll talk later. The words sounded careless, but inside, my road ahead had never been clearer. As long as I studied properly, got into a good university, and found a decent job, I could still sit in the VIP section one day, see any idol I wanted, without sacrificing everything like I did last time. I grabbed my school bag, ready to leave the room, when a thought crossed my mind. I turned, walked to Luna's closet, and pulled out a brand new dress, the fabric still smelling of the store. Pretty, I said sincerely, brushing the fabric with my fingers. Let me borrow it. Luna stiffened, clearly unwilling. But Marian spoke up smoothly, her voice sticky sweet. She's your sister. Let her wear it once. It's no big deal. I smiled and looked straight at her, my tone light but loaded. You're so kind, Aunt Marian. If anyone else saw this, they'd think I was your biological daughter instead. Her smile faltered for a second, while Luna's expression twisted slightly, resentment flashing in her eyes. For all her poise, she was still too young to hide what she felt. I put on Luna's dress and spun once in front of the mirror, then sighed dramatically. I'm so jealous of you, I said. You get to relax at home for the whole summer, while I have to suffer through tutoring classes. The corner of Luna's mouth twitched, and Marian could only force a weak smile. I watched them quietly, strangely calm inside. In my previous life, I'd spent so much energy rebelling against Dad that I missed every chance he gave me. By the time I realized it, I could only get into a mediocre music college, then drifted from bar to bar singing at night, my life soaked in alcohol and cigarette smoke. Luna, who always played the obedient angel, step by step got into a top 985 university, entered a big-name company, and shone under the spotlight I used to crave. From that moment on, our lives had split into two completely different directions. And this time, I wouldn't let myself go astray again. The tutoring center we chose was one Marian had carefully picked out. The teachers were competent, the facilities excellent. Dad had praised her effort for it. But I knew she had already calculated everything in her heart. She was betting I wouldn't stick with it. In the end, Luna would be the one to reap all the benefits. A clean and vicious move. She really was impressive. By procedure, the teachers had all the students take a placement exam first. When the results came back, my glaring red 40 points made the whole class burst into laughter. I didn't care. After all, I had leapt back in time. The fact that I didn't score a 0 was already a miracle. I'd stayed up all night memorizing until my eyes hurt, stuffing every scrap of knowledge I could into my head. That afternoon, when Dad got home from work and heard I'd actually gone to the tutoring center, he was delighted. Nina is being really good, he said. Let's go eat Western food tonight. The restaurant was warm with dim yellow lighting, the smell of steak floated in the air. Dad ordered me a 190 yuan steak, but only got himself a plate of 46 yuan spaghetti, smiling as he explained, I'm used to Chinese food. I don't really enjoy this stuff. I looked at him and felt a sudden sting in my nose. This man had worried for me, shouted at me, lost his temper over me, and still, time after time, he set the better things in front of me without hesitation. But Marian wouldn't let peace last. She put down her glass and smiled gently. "Nina, I called your teacher today. I heard that out of 5 subjects, you scored below average in all of them. Did they make a mistake?" Luna looked up, pretending to be surprised. "How could that be? With Nina's foundation, how would her scores be that low?" Marian sighed softly, her smile fading just enough. "Did you do badly on purpose because you're mad at your dad for not letting you study music?" Just one sentence, and Dad's face darkened instantly. He shot to his feet, the chair scraping back, his hand rising almost by reflex. "How could you be this unreasonable?" Marian leaned forward, calling out quickly, "Don't hit her, don't hit the child." But her hand moved just slow enough that his raised palm hovered in midair for a moment. A flicker of triumph flashed deep in her eyes. This time, I saw it clearly. I was no longer the terrified girl from my previous life. I looked up, forcing my voice to stay calm even though my eyes were a little red. "You can't really blame me," I said. "My stomach hurt today. I wasn't feeling well at all." Dad froze, his hand dropping. He rushed closer, voice suddenly full of worry. "What happened? Is it still hurting? Do I need to take you to the hospital?" The slap never landed. Marian and Luna shared a quick, disappointed glance. "I'm better now," I said softly. "Probably the breakfast I bought outside this morning wasn't clean." Dad frowned. "Didn't I tell you not to eat street food all the time? Your stomach is sensitive." I looked right at him. "Well, Aunt Marian didn't make breakfast. I couldn't go to class on an empty stomach, so I bought something on the way. It's my fault." Marian's smile stiffened. She forced a lazy tone into her voice. "If you don't eat at home, we just eat out too. What's the problem?" Dad's face darkened again. His gaze slowly moved from me to her. "That's how you take care of her," he said quietly. Marian pursed her lips, acting aggrieved. "I just got lazy once in a while. Luna also eats out all the time and she's fine." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "How is it the same? Nina had severe enteritis when she was little. She was hospitalized for a whole month. Back then, Eileen and I took turns staying with her every night, afraid something would happen." His voice caught at Eileen's name. The air grew heavy. I stared at him, my chest tightening. It had been so long since I'd seen him this vulnerable. My heart ached, full of regret and tenderness, but I still kept my tone a bit sulky. "I'm not that weak anymore," I muttered. "I'll eat breakfast at home from now on, okay?" That one sentence made Marian's shoulders tense. I knew she wouldn't be able to sleep in late from tomorrow onward. After dinner, Marian and Luna went to the restroom together, leaving Dad and me sitting downstairs alone. The automatic doors of the restaurant opened and closed, letting in waves of hot summer air that were quickly swallowed by the air conditioning. Dad stared outside, looking a little tired, his gaze drifting. I slid closer and spoke in a gentle voice. "Dad, don't blame Aunt Marian too much," I said. "I'm not her real daughter. She can't treat me like my own mom would." Dad looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. "Yeah. You're not her biological child." His voice was light, but it made my heart sway. He and Marian had been married for 3 years. Their relationship, on the surface, was stable. If I made a scene now, demanding they divorce, he would just think I was stubborn and trying to break them apart. Some things couldn't be solved by force. They needed time. That night, I stood in the hallway outside Marian's bedroom and heard her voice through the thin door. "Luna." Her tone was soft but edged with thorns. "Do you think Nina is deliberately going against me lately?" Luna snorted. "She's not that smart. Probably just got lucky by accident." I tightened my grip on the banister, the corner of my mouth curling. "Good. Let them keep underestimating me. The more they look down on me, the easier it would be to pull them down later. From that day on, I shamelessly claimed all of Luna's snacks, plush toys, figurines, and new dresses. In front of others, Marian always put on her gentle act. "If Nina likes it, just let her have it. You're the older sister," she'd say. Every time, I'd put on my sweetest smile, lean close to Luna's ear, and whisper, "Your mom treats me so well." Luna never said anything, but her eyes changed little by little. I could see the cracks forming in her heart. If Marian wanted to tear apart the bond between my dad and me, I'd let her feel what it was like to have her own mother-daughter bond crumble. Days went by like that. When Dad was home, I studied seriously and behaved. When he was at work, I still studied, just with my door locked, noise-canceling headphones on, and soft music playing to cover the sound of turning pages. Living life over again, I finally understood how much I'd once thrown away. At the tutoring center, I told the teacher honestly that my foundation was weak and asked them to teach me from the beginning. At first, they laughed, thinking I was making excuses. Then gradually, they realized I was serious. Memory is a strange thing. Knowledge that seems to have vanished is often just covered in dust. If you find the right key and open the old chest, concepts and formulas will light up again, one by one. As I began to change, Marian grew restless. She kept trying to drag me out: water park tickets, karaoke cards, invitations to bars. "There's a really famous singer performing there," she'd say sweetly. "He's won awards. If you go and ask him for some advice, maybe you'll get lucky." I lowered my head and smiled. Under her show of concern, I could clearly smell the stench of ulterior motives. I accepted all the tickets, cards, and sweet words she handed me, but I never once showed up where she wanted me. When it came to tutoring, I didn't miss a single session. Rain or blazing sun, I was in my seat on time. Seeing this, Marian's anxiety deepened. She knew that as long as I clung to my studies, Luna could never take my spot in that top-quality one-on-one class. So she hurried to sign Luna up too. But half the summer had already passed. The one-on-one places were full. In the end, Luna could only join a small group class of 6 students. I deliberately stoked the fire. "Aunt Marian, you really dropped the ball," I said innocently. "Everybody knows summer is prime time for tutoring. You should have thought about your daughter earlier. I heard Elaine, Trin Yuyan, got a one-on-one slot, you know." Just dropping Elaine's name hit Luna's most sensitive nerve. The two of them had always been at odds, competing in grades. Once I had lit that little fuse, Luna went home with a storm cloud on her face and confronted Marian the moment she walked through the door, demanding why she hadn't signed her up earlier. Marian froze for a moment, then her eyes flickered as she glanced at me sitting calmly on the sofa. She was suddenly at a loss for words. I just smiled, watching the drama. In this quiet war, summer flew by faster than I expected. When the first big exam of 11th grade results came out, I ranked 215th in the whole grade. For someone who had once fallen to the bottom, that number was already satisfying. Time travel hadn't magically turned me into a genius. The road ahead would still demand effort. The day the rankings were posted happened to be Marian's birthday. Our whole family went out to eat. Under the dim restaurant lights, glasses of red wine glowed softly. In the middle of the meal, she casually brought up grades. As soon as she heard my ranking, she let out a very tiny snort of laughter, so soft it was almost inaudible, but everyone heard it. She quickly covered her mouth, pretending to be embarrassed, then turned to me with a regretful sigh. "Nina, how did this happen? Your dad spent so much money for your one-on-one tutoring, but your results dropped compared to last time." Then she turned to Luna, smiling warmly. Luna's in a 6-person class, but she rose 18 places. She's in the top 100 now. She lowered her voice, sounding like a gentle wife giving advice. "Daniel, I think Nina just isn't suited for academic study. Maybe we should plan ahead. If she wants to do music, let her do music." The warm light in the restaurant cast deep shadows under my dad's eyes. I gripped my glass of water under the table, watching silently. This time, I didn't rush to speak. I lowered my head and let her continue. Because I knew, the show was almost over. Dad's knuckles turned white as he gripped his chopsticks, veins popping on the back of his hand. So that's it, he said quietly. She pretends to listen to me, but behind my back she sabotages all my efforts. I spent all that money on tutoring, and this is how she repays me? I sniffed, making my voice sound a little wronged. I wanted to do well, I murmured. But before the exam, Aunt Marian told me not to waste Dad's hard-earned money. She said if I'm not good at studying, I shouldn't be stubborn and should think about my future instead. She said Dad works too hard already, so I felt even more pressured. Dad's gaze swung sharply to Marian. And you call that encouraging? He said coldly. Marian forced a smile, her voice as gentle as ever. I just feel sorry for you, that's all. I didn't mean anything else. I pursed my lips, interjecting just in time. She's not wrong, I said. You're not just my dad anymore. You're her husband and Luna's uncle. You can't spend all your money just on me. She needs to think about her own future too. The air froze. Dad looked at me, then at Marian. His voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. I'm Nina's father, he said. The money I earn, I can spend however I want on my daughter. Who dares to interfere? His words landed like a hammer. Marian's face turned pale. She leaned toward him, acting soft and pleading. Don't get mad. I only worry about you overworking yourself. That's all. It took a long while for the tension to ease somewhat, but the worry in her eyes had turned to something sharper, fear. She understood very clearly, if Daniel continued to put me first, her position in this house would never be secure. That night, I overheard her in the bedroom, whispering urgently. My younger brother just recommended a financial product at the bank, she said. The interest is high and guaranteed. We still have savings left. Let's put some in, okay? Her tone was gentle, but every word carried greed. She was terrified that money would go to me instead of her. Dad's voice was low. We'll talk about it later, he said. Show me the documents first. I stood outside, listening, my lips curling. Soon, an opportunity landed in my lap. 3 days later was my mom's death anniversary. My mother, Eileen, died young. Back then, I was still in elementary school. Dad shouldered everything alone, working and raising me, turning down blind dates again and again. He was a man of few words, tough on the outside and soft inside, someone you couldn't help but respect. Back then, Marian, still my mom's best friend, would occasionally take me out to eat, talking and laughing like nothing was wrong. When she held her cup, she'd sigh, I wonder what your stepmother will be like if your dad remarries. Will she treat you well? A harmless little line, repeated often enough to plant a very real fear in my heart. Later, Dad did start seeing a teacher. She was gentle, proper, and sincere. I panicked. Under Marian's subtle hints, I was the one who suggested, Dad, why don't you marry Aunt Marian instead? She was Mom's best friend. She's sure to love me. Thinking back now, I want to slap my younger self. I personally opened the door and welcomed the wolf into our home. For a girl that age, no matter what, I couldn't fight the schemes of a seasoned, malicious woman. Dad bought a bouquet of white lilies, Mom's favorite, and we went to visit her grave. He sat by the tombstone, carefully plucking out the stamens one by one. Mom used to say that flowers lasted longer without them. Even though she'd been gone for years, he still remembered her little quirks. I watched his rough hands tremble slightly, sadness rising in my throat. The silence was heavy, but I knew this was the right time to play my part. Dad, I said softly. If you and Aunt Marian have a child later, will I still be the daughter you love most? He gave a bitter smile. I'm this old already. I'm not having more kids, he said. I lowered my head. One of my classmates said her dad said that too at first, I whispered. Then later, her stepmother had a son, and now they're a happy family of 3. She said she feels like an extra. My voice shook. Sometimes I feel like that too. You and Aunt Marian get along so well. And Luna's so obedient. Aunt Marian will never really see me as her own. I'm afraid that one day, you'll love Luna more than you love me. Memories from my previous life surged up, and my voice broke. Dad, what if one day, I can't even come home anymore? Dad was silent for a long time. Then his hand gently ruffled my hair. His voice was low and warm, like a vow. No, he said. You're my daughter. No matter what, you'll always have a home to come back to. When we got back, he immediately told Marian he wanted to buy a house for me. Marian panicked. She's still underage, she said quickly. We don't know which city she'll go to for university. Isn't it too early to buy? It's not early, Daniel said firmly. Prices are going to go up soon. The place we're living in now is half Eileen's. This house has to be bought. Marian's eyes darted as she quickly suggested, if you buy it just like that, she won't appreciate your effort. How about this, if she gets into an honors class this term, we buy the house as a reward. If not, we use the money for that financial product. My school had a rule. Placements for the 11th grade honors classes were decided based on the first term exam results. The top 120 science students would go into the honors science class. Dad thought for a long moment. Marian pressed her advantage. That way, it motivates Nina to study harder too, she said. Finally, he nodded. Okay. Nina, if you want a house, you'll have to work for it. I had to admit, Marian was good. If I failed, she'd win both the house and the money. I couldn't let that happen. If that house money fell into her beloved financial product, I'd have a harder time than climbing to heaven to get it back. I threw myself into my studies with everything I had. Luna obviously wasn't about to slack off either. Nina, I've got a really good novel, she said one day. I glanced at the cover. Tragedy, abuse, messed up values. I'll pass, I said dryly. I don't feel like losing sleep from rage. 2 days later, she ran up again, excited. Nina, I found an amazing new singer. I glanced at her phone screen and almost laughed. It was Theo, the idol who, a few years later, would be exposed for a secret marriage and child and completely vanish from the industry. I grunted and went back to my book. The next day, she chirped, there's a new ice rink. I got tickets. Let's go. All I could see in my head was the image of my younger self slipping, breaking a leg, and being bedridden for 2 months. No. My tone was so cold it froze the air. Then, as if I just remembered something, I turned to Marian, my voice full of innocent admiration. You're so good to me, I said. You're even willing to sell a house worth hundreds of thousands just to motivate me to study. You cook all my favorite dishes and give me 300 yuan in pocket money every week. I bet Luna gets even more than me, huh? Luna's face darkened, while Marian's smile faltered. That night, loud arguing echoed from the flower beds downstairs. When Luna came back up, her eyes were red and swollen, lips pressed tight as she brushed past me without a word. I smiled faintly. A tiny crack had appeared. It was only a matter of time before the whole thing shattered. Marian couldn't stand it. She pulled out the big guns to salvage her image with me. Smiling, she handed me 2 shiny tickets. Nina, your favorite idol is having a concert in City S. These are front row tickets, over 1,000 yuan each. I waited in line for ages to get them. Are you happy? I widened my eyes, putting on a moved expression. Aunt Marian, you're amazing. Thank you so much, I said, voice trembling a little. But as soon as I got back to my room, I listed the tickets online. Within an hour, someone bought them. I traded them for a ticket to Theo's birthday fan meeting, and even made a 500 yuan profit. Not bad. I texted the buyer, hope you enjoy the concert, because truth be told, Theo wasn't my idol. He was Luna's. She just hid it carefully, even from her own mom. I propped my chin up, smiling at the new ticket in my hand. This time, I'd earn money and let Marian lose face in one hit. Years later, when Theo's scandals exploded, Luna had gotten drunk in a bar and posted on her moments, 10 years of loving you. I guess I'm officially heartbroken today. Just thinking of that memory made me smirk. Life really was one long, ridiculous play. This time, I was the one holding the script. I quietly slipped the fan meeting ticket to Luna. "Kaylee gave this to me," I said casually, naming one of my classmates. "I'm not that interested. If you have a friend who wants to go, you can give it to her." Luna's eyes lit up instantly. Her hands trembled as she took it, trying very hard to act calm. "I'll see," she said. I almost laughed. Kai, my childhood friend, was a famous top student. His uncle worked in the entertainment industry, so getting rare merch wasn't difficult. He had never agreed with me chasing idols. "This industry isn't what you think it is," he'd once said. "You're not suited for that world." We'd argued so badly we didn't speak for a while. Marian had taken the chance to nudge our relationship colder. Later, when I was cheated on by a scumbag and fell seriously ill, it was Kai who showed up first. Freshly graduated and newly employed, he paid my hospital fees in full without a single complaint. When he saw how I'd changed now, he only smiled and half joked, half serious, "See? I told you. Neither your stepmother nor your stepsister truly has your back. Took you long enough to wake up." He helped me gather a pile of Theo-related merchandise, signed photos, a handheld fan he'd used in a drama, a limited edition birthday card. When I handed them to Luna, she shook with excitement, her eyes shining like fireworks. She joined the main fan group, quickly became a group leader, and nearly fainted from happiness. I just sat there, sipping my tea, lips curved in a faint smile. Such a small gift, such a big fire. In this little war of ours, I didn't need to do much. I just had to know when to add a spark. Luna lost herself more and more in that fan world, but still tried to hide it from Marian. She was exhausted, caught between love and fear. More than once, when I got up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, I'd see the light under her door still on and hear the soft tap of her keyboard. Group leader duties, I guessed. Meanwhile, Kai and I ground away at the mountain of homework. We slept at 11:30 p.m., got up at 5:30 a.m. In autumn, the sun came up later. As I recited English words by the window, the sky slowly brightened, layers of red clouds staining the eastern horizon. It was like someone had taken a bright brush and painted streaks of color across my once bleak life. One day after a nap break, I woke to everyone around me snickering. I blinked in confusion. Kai leaned over, smiling. "You were talking in your sleep," he said. "Solving the problem you couldn't get before. Did I get it right?" I blurted. The whole class burst out laughing. Kai chuckled. "You mumbled +7. I flipped through my workbook with trembling fingers. The answer was +7. I really had solved it in my sleep. The midterm exam rolled around faster than expected. It wasn't just about the honors class anymore. It was also about whether I could keep that house. The night before the test, Dad sat with me for a long time. "I've seen how hard you've worked," he said. "The most important thing in life is perseverance. You can't slack off. But don't push yourself too far either. You're so skinny now. If your mom could see this, she'd come scold me in my dreams." I laughed and teased him, saying that would be a bargain for him. The next morning, before dawn, he had to leave early to meet a client. The house felt cold and quiet, just the three of us under the kitchen's dim yellow light. Marian smiled gently, setting a cup of soy milk in front of me. "Nina, eat breakfast. I'll drive you two to school afterward." I touched the cup, and froze. It was cold. The steam had long disappeared. I raised an eyebrow. "Aunt Marian, this soy milk is cold?" I said slowly. My stomach's been weak since I was little. Drinking something straight from the fridge early in the morning in winter is like asking for trouble. Marian laughed, sounding natural. I just made it. I was afraid you'd burn your mouth, so I cooled it in the fridge for a bit. I said nothing. Instead, I calmly slid the cold cup in front of Luna. I can't drink cold things, I said. Let's switch. Marian's expression changed. She snatched the cup back at once. Oh dear, it got too cold. I'll heat it up in the microwave for both of you. I raised an eyebrow and smiled lightly. Sometimes, the best way to hurt someone is to hand them the knife and let them stab themselves. After breakfast, I went to the bathroom. When I sat down, I realized there was no toilet paper, so I stepped out to grab some. As I passed the hallway, I heard Luna's whisper. Mom, what are you worried about? With that pig brain, there's no way she's getting into the honors class. Marian's voice was cold and scornful. I just want to be sure. Do you know how much a house like that costs? Stupid girl. I paused for a moment, then quietly shut the bathroom door behind me, the corner of my mouth curling. On the drive to school, Marian put on her warmest smile. Nina, don't stress too much, she said. Your dad said since you're not 18 yet, the house can't be under your name anyway. A neat little wedge to drive between us. She wanted me to think Dad was backing out. I just smiled. It's fine, I replied. Either way, I'll get into the honors class. Her lips twitched. Luna gave a quiet snort, then put on a sugary voice as soon as I glanced at her. You can do it, Nina. I believe in you, she said. I nearly laughed out loud. At the school gate, as usual, she put on a show in front of classmates. Nina's been working really hard, she said. She says she'll definitely get into the honors class. I stood beside her, expression calm, lips curved in a gentle smile. The looks on our classmates' faces were interesting. Apart from the top 30, who dared to say that at a time like this, me, ranked 200-something, saying it, I added sweetly, I learned this confidence from Luna. She told me it wouldn't be a problem at all. So I'm just encouraging myself. I squeezed her arm. Right, big sister? Her smile froze. After a long beat, she still couldn't muster a reply. She'd wanted to show off, but I'd shoved the show right back in her hands. Kai and I were in the same exam room. Before the test, he reached out to rub my cold ear. Nina, let's both get into the honors class, he said. I took out my pencils and realized both of them had broken tips. They were fine this morning. I remembered Luna had touched my pencil case in the car. So she thought I couldn't pass, yet still pulled cheap tricks like this. Fortunately, I had a mechanical pencil and gel pen as backup. The 2-day exam felt like shedding a skin. There were more than 600 students in our science stream. Climbing from the middle of that pile into the top 120 was no simple task. When the results went up, Kai's name gleamed at the very top of the science rankings. I scanned from the beginning to 10th place. My heart sank. No sign of my name. It was like my chest had turned into a leaky basket, all hope draining out. Had I failed again, had I lost that house for the second life in a row? My wrist shook as I grabbed Kai's sleeve. I think I didn't make it, I muttered. I checked the top 10. My name isn't there. Can you check the last 10 for me? There was a moment of silence. Then Kai's voice lit up. Nina, I found you, he said. My heart jumped. Where? He laughed, eyes crinkling. Last slot. Rank 120. Open your eyes, coward. I followed his finger. At the very bottom of the red list, the 3 characters for Jiang Nin Hin, now Nina Jiang, in my mind, seemed to glow. I had done it. I was in the honors class. The world exploded into color. I stared blankly for a moment, then burst into tears and laughter all at once. All the late nights, all the frustration I'd swallowed, they were worth it. Kai tapped my head lightly, smiling so hard his eyes almost closed. I'm at the top of the list, you're at the bottom, he said. Beginning and end, nice symmetry, right? I won't stay at the bottom forever, I croaked. I'll catch up to you someday. He raised an eyebrow. I'll be waiting. That evening, when I got home, Dad was already there. Before I could change my shoes, he rushed to the door. How did it go? He asked, eyes full of hope. I'm 120th, I said, unable to hide my grin. I got into science class 1. He stared for a few seconds, then his eyes lit up. Really? You really made it into the honors class? He clapped my shoulder, laughing so hard the corners of his eyes wrinkled. Good job. Good job. My daughter did great. Your mom would be so happy if she knew. The pride in his eyes was real. It had been a long time since I'd seen that. Then Marian's cold voice drifted out from the kitchen. Change your shoes. I just mopped. She sniffed. Last place in the honors class. Nothing to brag about. I turned, smiling brightly. Even last place is still in, I said loudly. My gaze slid to Luna. Her lips pressed tight, her face twisting. Dad leaned down to change shoes, then suddenly remembered something. Right, which class did Luna get into? He asked. Marian perked up immediately. That's right, I've asked you a bunch of times and you keep dodging the question. You must have done better than Nina, right? Is that why you're worried she'll feel bad? Luna's face turned red. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she snapped, I ranked 145th. I'm in science class 3. Happy now? She ran into her room and slammed the door. Marian stood there, stunned, before she hurried to call the homeroom teacher, making a scene so loud it echoed all the way to the balcony. How could this be? Her grades have always been stable. How could she suddenly drop this much? Are you sure you didn't miscalculate? You want me to calm down? How am I supposed to calm down? If you don't give me an explanation, I'll report this. It took a long time before she finally hung up, her face dark. She stormed back into the living room, then to Luna's door. Open up and tell me what happened, she shouted. Leave me alone. Luna cried. I need to think. They went at it back and forth. I pretended to comfort them. Maybe the teacher did make a mistake, I said lightly. It happens. They might have misgraded Luna's paper. Then I turned to Dad. Either way, I made it into the honors class. Let's go house hunting this weekend. Dad agreed at once. He tried to persuade Marian not to pressure Luna too much. Things only get harder from here, he said. She'll have more chances later. The next day, during break, I saw a crowd gathered outside the office. From inside, Marian's shrill voice cut through the air. How come everyone else has their exam papers and my daughter doesn't? Is there some kind of favoritism going on? Some shady internal deals? I'm going to file a complaint. Luna's grades have always been stable. Even Nina got into the honors class, how could Luna not? I know exactly how smart my daughter is. Teachers took turns calming her down, but she refused to listen. If the issue had just been Luna missing the honors class, she wouldn't have gone this far. But she thought that if a mistake was found and Luna's score was raised, then I, ranked last, would be the one to get kicked out. No honors class, no house. Hundreds of thousands of yuan at stake. Of course she was desperate. Luna rushed over, face red as a cooked shrimp. She tugged at Marian's sleeve over and over, begging, Mom, I can still get into the honors class later. Please stop. You're embarrassing me. I stepped forward, dropping oil into the fire. Yeah. Aunt Marian, Dad still needs you to help look at houses, I said sweetly. Luna pulled harder. Let's go, she whispered. Please. Marian, rage at boiling point, snapped and slapped her across the face. The sound was crisp, echoing across the yard. "Useless girl," she hissed. "Everything I do is for you." Luna's cheek instantly swelled, finger marks clear against her skin. The watching students fell silent. I stepped between them and pulled Luna behind me. "Aunt Marian," I said loudly, "Luna already tried her best. It's just one test." Instead of comforting her, you hit her in front of everyone? My voice rang out clear and sharp. "In front of all these people, don't you think this is a bit much?" Whispers rose all around us. "She hit her kid in public? That's Luna's mom? Poor girl." Luna stood behind me, covering her face, her shoulders trembling. After a moment, she ran off without a word, vanishing into the crowd. Just then, a teacher from the records office rushed out holding a stack of papers. "I found Luna's exams," he said. The scores were recalculated. Not only had there been no mistake, one question had been given 2 extra points by accident. The room went cold. Teachers exchanged looks and sighed. Marian's face turned paper white. Word spread quickly. Within a day, Luna became infamous. "Is that her? The one whose mom made a scene?" "Yeah. They even gave her extra points." "How does she go to school after that?" Parents began warning their kids to keep their distance. And Marian, after realizing she'd personally destroyed her daughter's reputation, tried to patch things up. She brought snacks to Luna's door, spoke softly, knocked gently. But Luna had changed. Every time she came home, she locked herself in her room. She quietly brought food in and ate by herself, no longer joining us at the table. The clinking of her chopsticks sounded oddly lonely in that big apartment. I watched and smiled faintly. My house hunt went smoothly. I found a bright, spacious 3-bedroom apartment, 150 square meters. The layout was good, the location promising. I could see its future value at a glance. When the agent stated the total cost, 800,000 yuan all in, Marian nearly choked. "A girl your age living alone doesn't need something this large," she said tightly. "Of course I do," I replied sweetly. "You and Dad and Luna will need rooms when you visit." Her smile cracked. Dad studied the urban planning map on the wall. "This area's a bit far from downtown," he said. "Facilities aren't developed yet." I smiled. "They will be," I said. "Dad, in 5 years there'll be a subway station 500 meters from here. A key school within 1 kilometer, a hospital within 2, and a high-speed rail station within 3. This place will definitely go up in value." He thought about it, then nodded. "I'll buy it," he said. "As long as you like it." "Thank you, Dad," I said softly. The total came to 800,000 yuan, a number that almost made Marian swallow her tongue. With her core interests threatened, she dropped all pretense of gentleness. Right in front of the sales office, she started shouting. "This place is too far, the facilities aren't ready, and Nina's still underage. Why rush? If you put this into financial products, we'd earn so much interest." I watched calmly, like I was watching a play. When she finally paused to take a breath, I cut in. "Let's be honest, Aunt Marian," I said. "You just don't want Dad to buy a house for me, right?" The air froze. She stared at me in fury. "You don't want him to spend on me. Isn't that it?" Dad turned toward her slowly, his eyes icy. "This house will be bought," he said firmly. "I keep my promises." I seized the chance. "Exactly," I added. "Half of this money is what Mom left behind for my dowry. I'm just using it a bit earlier, and the property will appreciate over time. It's an investment, really. We're a family, shouldn't we stand together on this? You don't see me as family at all. And besides, the money is Dad's, from before your marriage. What right do you have to object?" Marian exploded. "It's 800,000, not 8,000, she screamed. "His money is our marital property. I'm his wife." "I don't agree." Her voice echoed across the barren lot. The sales agents nearby swapped glances, trying not to laugh. Her mask had finally fallen off completely. I raised my voice, not backing down. Then maybe you shouldn't have suggested that stupid bet in the first place, I said coldly. What kind of adult doesn't keep her word? Caught up in anger, she snapped without thinking. How was I supposed to know a pig like you could actually make it into the honors class? Dad's face changed instantly. She realized too late what she'd said, ducking her head as if she were the victim. I just wanted some security for my later years, she sobbed. I've poured my heart into this family, Dad snorted. I've never touched a single yuan of your premarital savings, he said quietly. I pay for everything, tuition, living expenses, even Luna's pocket money. Don't talk to me about fairness. He signed the contract on the spot. The house was fully paid. Not long after, I got the property certificate in my hand. That night at dinner, I laid the little blue booklet on the table so the floor plan was clearly visible. Dad, you take the master bedroom and I'll take the guest room, I said. This room can be the study, this is your house, he cut in. You sleep in the master bedroom. I closed the booklet and smiled brightly at Marian. You're always welcome to visit my place, Aunt Marian, I said. Her face turned an impressive shade of green. After the house, Dad's attitude toward Marian grew colder. Her whispers in his ear no longer worked like they used to. I used the chance to test the waters. She's not sincere, I told him. Why don't you divorce her? He sighed. When you're in college, then I'll think about it, he said. Adult problems are for adults to solve. You just focus on studying. Daniel was a good man, but sometimes goodness becomes chains. Marian, panicking, doubled down on her tricks. She urged him relentlessly to invest in private lending, dangling high interest returns. Back then, private lending was popular. 10,000 yuan could generate 1,000 in interest a year. But I knew it was a trap. Seeing him waver, I struck quickly. Dad, I dreamed of Mom last night, I said over breakfast. She told me not to put money somewhere dangerous. Said it'd hurt our luck. I don't know where exactly she meant, maybe I was just imagining things, he fell into thought. A few days later, I coincidentally showed him news reports about Ponzi schemes and illegal fundraising. I didn't mention private lending, but the seed of doubt was planted. That night, he refused Marian firmly. Despite the chaos at home, I stayed focused on my studies. Sometimes the content was so dense I wanted to cry from the pressure. In those moments, Kai would drag me out for a walk or a snack, keeping me from crumbling. According to school rules, each major exam allowed 2 students from each regular science class to challenge the honors classes by knocking out their bottom-ranked students. I knew that as the weakest in science class 1, I could be kicked out at any time. I didn't dare relax. Marian thought the same. She whispered in Luna's ear, "You have to knock Nina out this time. If you can't even beat her, what good are you?" I retaliated in my own way. Your mom will never be as important as mine in my dad's heart, I told Luna softly. That's why she pushes you so hard. She wants to use your grades to prove her worth. She never studies or works, just watches dramas at home all day. What is she really contributing? Luna clenched her bag strap, muttering, "She's so annoying." I patted her shoulder. Then you better ace this exam, I said. If you don't get into the honors class, she'll skin you alive. Marian not only hounded Luna, she also tried to make peace with me. My birthday was coming up, and Dad asked what I wanted. A tablet, I said honestly. He refused immediately. No way, he said. It'll distract you. Marian, of course, wanted nothing more than for me to have distractions. The next day, she secretly bought a tablet and handed it to me. Nina, I was wrong about the house, she said with a contrite smile. Consider this your birthday present. Don't let your dad see it. I happily accepted. Then I handed it to Luna. Your mom's really generous, I said sweetly. She bought this expensive present for me. If I keep it in my room, Dad might find out. You hold it for me, okay? I'll borrow it sometimes. Since Marian had confiscated Luna's computer for her poor performance, the tablet was a godsend. Around 2 a.m. that night, I got up for water and saw blue light spilling from under her door. Not exactly the glow of a diligent student. I smirked and went back to bed. It didn't matter what I did. People who'd fallen once knew how easy it was to fall again. Midterms approached. Marian pinned all her hopes on this exam, convinced that once Luna beat me, she'd have the moral high ground to push me out. She filled Luna with supplements and imported milk, signed her up for extra classes, even held a pathetic little folk ritual with a bunch of tacky weeds, lightly tapping her daughter's back and chanting, "May your grades bloom layer by layer like sesame flowers." Can you stop being superstitious? Luna snapped. It's creepy. On exam day, Marian wasn't allowed onto campus. Security had blacklisted her after the office incident. She stood outside the gate anyway, waiting anxiously. When we came out, she pounced. How did you do? Did you make it? Why are your scores not posted yet? Why won't the guard let me go in? This school, I smiled. Well, you did cause quite a stir last time. They're just following protocol, I said. Her face froze. Luna dragged her away before she could explode. Around the corner, mother and daughter started arguing again. Luna's voice shook with anger. Why can't you stop embarrassing me? She hissed. They don't want you there. Just let it go. I'm your mother, how dare you talk to me like that? Marian shot back. You still haven't told me, did you get into the honors class? Did you beat Nina? Luna walked faster, face blank. Impatient, Marian turned to me. You tell me, she demanded. I smiled peacefully. She didn't do that well, I said. She's 18th in her class. I'm 98th in the whole grade, top 100 now. The words were a lit match. Marian exploded right there on the sidewalk, berating Luna at the top of her lungs. How are your grades getting worse? I feed you and clothe you, and this is how you repay me? Even Nina is in the top 100 now. What about you? How is the child I raised losing to a stepchild? People slowed down to stare. Luna's face flushed with shame. If you're so capable, why don't you take the exams? She shouted back. You cheated on a good man and blew all your savings. Why is it always my fault? By the time we reached home, Luna slammed her bedroom door again. Marian, still fuming, barged in to search her things and found all the Theo merchandise I'd given her. She lost it completely. She ripped up photos, tore posters, and announced she'd burn the rest. It was exactly like that time she'd coaxed Dad into smashing my music CDs, same pattern, anger, control, destroying what we loved. This time, though, the victim was her own daughter. She also found the tablet. Holding it up, she stormed into my room. I bought this for you, she shouted. Why is it with Luna? You did this on purpose, didn't you? You wanted to lead her astray so she'd fail and you could look good. How can you be so vicious? Just like your mother, no good at all. Enough. Dad's voice came from the doorway, icy cold. Marian spun around, startled. You're home early. He strode in, snatched the tablet, and glared at her. I told you not to buy this for Nina, he said. Why did you still buy it? First you give her money to run off to City S, then you egg her on to chase idols and do music. You said being a stepmother was hard, and I believed you. But now? This isn't hard. It's malicious. He pointed to the ceiling. And Eileen, she was the best woman in the world. When I had nothing, she still chose me. She suffered with me and died before she could enjoy any of it. What right do you have to insult her? You were her friend. She helped you through college. Are you worthy of her? Veins stood out on his neck. I want a divorce. Marian collapsed into sobs, wailing about sacrifice and love, but he ignored her. He sat alone in the dark living room that night, not turning on a single light. The hallway lamp cast a long shadow from his hunched figure, stretching all the way to the stairs. After the storm of anger, his voice was strangely calm. "In 3 years of marriage, I've paid for everything," he said. "I've never touched a cent of your savings. I've done my part. I don't owe you anything." Marian knelt at his feet, crying that she'd never meant to hurt him, that she'd change, that she couldn't live without him. But her tears weren't for love. They were for money. She refused to sign the papers. By day she played the pitiful wife, by night she turned on me the moment Dad left, spewing venom. "If it weren't for you, do you think he'd treat me like this?" she hissed. "You think he could have raised you without me? You ungrateful little brat." I didn't argue. I recorded everything and played it back for Dad secretly. The more he heard, the quieter he became. His eyes grew colder. In the end, she flipped the board. "Give me 500,000 yuan and I'll sign," she said. "The hell you will," Dad snapped. "You think you're made of gold?" They fought over it for days. Even the housekeeper resigned, unwilling to listen to nightly screaming matches. From then on, Marian dropped the pretense entirely. She only drove Luna to and from school, pretending I didn't exist. Meals were full of dishes I couldn't stomach, spicy, greasy, seafood. Dad wanted to compromise. "Maybe I should just give her something," he muttered. "I don't want this to affect your studies." "No," I said firmly. "Not 1 cent. The house is yours. This place is yours. She deserves nothing." I started secretly planning. Once the divorce was final, we'd change the lock, pack up their belongings, and throw them out. I was ready for a long war. Then life handed me a gift. One day, during my period, I stained my pants near the end of the last class and got permission to go home early. I didn't expect that this little accident would open a door onto the truth. As I stepped out of the elevator, a man came out at the same time. He looked familiar. Then I saw the small mole by his lips, and my mind clicked. It was him. On that snowy night in my previous life, he had stood beside Marian and helped her shove me out into the cold. Back then, she'd called him honey, in a sickeningly sweet voice. So they'd been together all along. She'd even brought him into our home. Rage surged through me. While Dad was struggling with whether to divorce her, she'd already emotionally left him. That weekend, while Marian was out, I went to see Kai's uncle and bought several tiny cameras. I installed them in the living room and master bedroom. I thought getting caught once would make her cautious. But within a week, while Dad was away on a business trip, I had all the proof I needed. The footage was crystal clear. She and the man, Eric, held each other on my father's bed. I almost broke the screen-smashing pause. My stomach churned, a mix of disgust and fury. That night, Luna stayed late at school. I waited until the house was quiet, then put the video on the TV when Marian came back. She froze when she saw it. "When did you record this?" she whispered. "Where did you put the cameras?" She lunged at me. I grabbed her wrist, slammed her into the sofa, and fisted my hand in her hair. She screamed in pain, tears streaming. "What are you doing? Let go. You touch me and I'll send this video to every single person we know," I said calmly. "The neighbors, the school, your relatives, Eric's wife. I already looked her up. Her family's got money and connections. What do you think they'll do to you?" She trembled. I don't dare anymore," she stammered. I let her go and sat back, eyes flat on the screen as the images played again. "I've made multiple backups," I said. "You're going to sign the divorce papers and walk away with nothing. If you even think about bargaining, I'll print still frames of this and plaster them all over my school." She shuddered violently. "I'll talk to him," she whispered. "We'll break up." "I don't care what you do," I said. "All I care about is you getting out, with empty hands." The next day, when Dad came home from his trip, he found the video already queued up. I made him take his blood pressure medication first. It still wasn't enough to keep his hands from shaking. He watched without a word. Marian stood by the wall, pale and silent. When the clip stopped, she slowly took a folded paper from her bag. "Sign whatever you want," she said hoarsely. "I won't fight anymore." They haggled with lawyers over the details. In the end, she got nothing more than what she'd come in with. She packed her things into boxes and dragged them out one by one. Luna walked behind her, clutching a single suitcase. Dark clouds gathered outside, a storm was coming. Luna's eyes were red, not quite resentful anymore, just tired. Revenge doesn't erase the old wounds. It just gives you enough space to breathe. At the elevator, Marian glanced back at me. If looks could kill, she would have shredded me to pieces. But in the end, she stepped in without a word. Thunder rolled across the sky as the rain poured down. Luna lingered in the hallway, one hand on the wall. She stared at me, voice hoarse. "The fan meeting ticket, the merch, the tablet, you did all of that on purpose, didn't you?" I said nothing. "Why?" she exploded. "Why do you have to do this to me? You already have everything. Your dad loves you. You're pretty. You have a genius childhood friend who'd do anything for you. Why did you have to take everything from me too?" I laughed softly. "Don't play the victim," I said. "Have you forgotten what you and your mother did to me in my last life? You flattered me, egged me on to chase idols, pushed me into bars and parties, spread rumors about me at school. You two dug the hole and watched me fall. And when I finally crawled out, you're mad that I returned the favor?" Lightning flashed across her face, illuminating the hatred in her eyes. "Fine," she spat. "I'll surpass you someday. I'll win. I'll be waiting," I said. I'd actually love to see that. Time moved on. End of 11th grade, another big exam. I barely clung to the honors class, sitting at rank 101. Luna slipped all the way to 300. We met by the rankings again. "I thought you were going to surpass me," I said lightly. "I even slowed down for you. How did you manage to fall so far that you can't even see my shadow?" She nearly choked. Before marrying Dad, Marian had some savings. Trying to save face, she poured everything into private lending, ignoring both Dad's warnings and mine. She even dragged the old lady upstairs into the mess. The old woman came to ask Dad's opinion. "Put it in a fixed deposit," he advised. "At least that way it's safe." Marian sighed dramatically. "If you're not going to invest, then just leave it in the bank," she said. "It's better than doing nothing." I smiled slightly. "Or you could buy real estate," I offered. "Property never goes out of style." The old lady waved her hand. "I'm already old. One apartment is enough." Dad still hesitated over new investments. Then came the official announcement of the new subway line. The apartment we'd bought for me sat right by the new stop. Within a month, its value had jumped 50%. Dad was overjoyed. "If you dream of your mom again," he joked, "ask her what to buy next time." I kept a straight face. "She says the slum district in East Side," I said. He blinked. "That place? Leaky roofs, flooded alleys, rats everywhere. Why would we buy that?" I bit back a grin. That area would be slated for redevelopment soon. One old shack could be traded for several new apartments. Investors were already sniffing around. Dad believed in omens more than reports. So in the end, he bought 3 small units there, just in case. When Marian heard, she laughed herself sick in her friend's group chat. "He bought 3 shacks in that dump," she wrote. "The man's an idiot. Thinks he's found a bargain. Without me, he's nothing." Dad wavered a little, but he figured even if those turned out badly, my apartment's appreciation would cover any lost profit. He slept better after that. A year later, when the redevelopment news became official, those 3 shacks turned into 9 new apartments plus nearly 2 million yuan in compensation. Dad was so excited he couldn't sleep. By then, I was already in 12th grade. Our schedule was brutal. Mock exams, joint exams, citywide tests. Dad cut back on overtime and hired a housekeeper for us. The house grew quiet. No more shouting, no more tears. Just me, my books, and the steady ticking of the clock. Sometimes I'd forget to eat from studying too hard. By afternoon, my stomach would growl like thunder and Kai would drag me to the cafeteria. I discovered bus 6 was smoother than bus 18, and easier for reviewing words. Tea worked better than coffee for keeping me awake. In autumn, the sky brightened around 6. At 11 at night, the sanitation workers made their last sweep of the street. Real exam papers were harder than the workbooks. The periodic table didn't need complete memorization, only the frequently tested elements. The last math question always felt like a boss in a game, coming to kill me. I realized finding the right method mattered more than raw memorization. One test at a time, I inched up. First big exam of 12th grade, I jumped to rank 95. Next mock, 89. Then 80. Then 77. At the final citywide exam, I hit rank 50. I kept thinking there would be more time to improve. But the college entrance exam waits for no one. The day came. The weather was hot and sticky. The air conditioner outside hummed loudly. The night before, I had that dream again, the one where I was back in the hospital room, clinging to the edge of Dad's bed, begging him to wake up while he lay motionless. Or in the snow, my blood staining the ground, feeling my life slip away. This time, even if I failed the exam, I had enough assets to live comfortably. But that wasn't enough. If I stopped there, I would never be worthy of this second chance, and of Daniel's faith in me. In my previous life, I'd disappointed him so badly that all he could do was walk away with a tired sigh. This time, I wanted to see pride in his eyes. Last life, I hit rock bottom. This life, I wanted to soar. I didn't just want a safe life. I wanted power, knowledge, independence, the ability to stand on my own. I wouldn't waste this rebirth. Thunder rumbled outside as summer rain drummed against the window. It washed the dusty city clean. Just like me, I thought. Everything before this was ashes. From now on, it would be a completely new life. I twisted open my pen, took a deep breath, and started writing. Question by question, page by page, my pen raced in time with my heartbeat. Before the scores were announced, Kai got a call from Tsinghua University's admissions office. He'd been accepted. When the automated voice finally read my scores out, it sounded surreal. Total, 633. In my last life, that number had been 336. A stain that never washed away. My eyes stung. Dad's hands shook as he grabbed mine. Good, he said, voice cracking. Good. I knew you could do it. You've worked so hard, Nina. He cried openly, shoulders shaking. I laughed through my tears. For the first time, crying and laughing felt like the same thing, a goodbye and a beginning. That year, the country was changing fast. The evening news showed plans for urban renewal. Not long after, officials came to our building to discuss demolition compensation. The 3 shacks Dad bought on a hunch turned into 9 new apartments and nearly 2 million cash. Fate itself seemed to have been rewritten. At my college acceptance party, Dad's face was red with drink and joy. Friends took turns congratulating him. Someone shouted, "Daniel, share some investment tips with us. You really hit the jackpot with those houses." He laughed, waving his hands. "I don't have any skills," he said. "It's all thanks to my wife, my late wife. She came to me in my dreams, you know. Every time I wondered what to do, I asked her in my head. She's the one watching over us." He glanced at me. "As for Nina getting into college, that's her own hard work. She takes after her mother, smart and diligent." Everyone applauded, teasing him for being such a faithful husband. Later, when the guests left, the room was quiet except for the faint smell of alcohol. Under the warm lights, Dad's face looked older, but gentler, too. He sat on the sofa, half drunk, his voice low. "If your mom were still here," he sighed. "If she could see you like this, she'd be so proud. I owe her. We suffered together for years, and right when things got better, she was gone." His eyes reddened again. I stepped forward and held his hand. "You treated her well," I said. "She knew that. Even if you didn't have much, being loved sincerely is already happiness." He smiled through his tears. "Things are better now," he said. "It's just a pity she's not here to see it." We walked down the hotel stairs together. The lobby lights glowed warmly behind us. As soon as we stepped outside, I saw her. Marian. Her hair was frizzy, her body gaunt, her clothes old and worn. The last time I'd seen her was before my final exams, arguing with Luna in front of the school. I'd assumed she'd keep her distance out of shame. I'd underestimated her. She hurried over, voice trembling with forced familiarity. "Daniel, you shouldn't drink so much," she said. "You have high blood pressure." "The doctor said, Dad," I said sharply. The word snapped him awake. He pulled his arm back. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice ice. Marian forced a smile. "I heard Nina was celebrating, so I came to congratulate her, but I'm late," she said. Tears quickly pooled in her eyes. "Daniel, I know I was wrong. I've regretted it every day this past year. But back then, Nina still had her exams. You didn't want her distracted, so we didn't talk about us." She stared at him with a hopeful, pleading look. "Now that she's done, shouldn't we sit down and talk?" Dad's hand trembled in mine. "I have nothing to say to you," he replied. She tried again. "I've heard you've turned down all blind dates this past year," she said. "That means you still have me in your heart, doesn't it?" "I really loved you." "Heaven knows." He took a step back. "No," he said. "I just don't want to marry again." "It has nothing to do with you." She flinched. Tears spilled over. "We were so happy before," she insisted. "Didn't you say I was gentle and caring?" The words made my skin crawl. "You cheated and lost all your money," I said coolly. "Eric left you, didn't he? And those private lending schemes wiped out what you had left. Now that you've heard about the demolition money, you came running back. You think my dad is some kind of walking ATM who'll save you?" Marian's mouth worked soundlessly. "That's not true," she whispered. "Then why are you wearing the same dress he bought you years ago?" I asked. "And those shoes we threw out? You dug them back out too? At least pretend a little harder." She lunged forward and grabbed Dad's arm. "Daniel, they say a couple's bond is for life," she sobbed. "We were together 3 years. I know you better than any other woman. I swear I'll devote myself to you from now on. I'll treat Nina like my real daughter." Dad tried to shake her off. I signaled the hotel security with a look. Before I could speak, a familiar voice cut in. "Mom. Luna." She looked exhausted, caught between anger and embarrassment. "Let's go," she said quietly. "They don't want us here. Don't make this worse." Marian turned on her. "What do you expect me to do?" she snapped. "The lender took everything. You couldn't even get into a second-rate college. How am I supposed to live? Rely on you? So it's all my fault again," Luna said, laughing bitterly through tears. "Uncle treated you so well and you cheated on him. I told you not to invest in those scams and you didn't listen. Now we're broke and it's still my fault." They argued in the hotel driveway like no one else existed. I helped Dad into a cab. He wiped his forehead, breathing hard. "Good thing I divorced her," he muttered. Otherwise I'd be in the hospital right now. We drove away. Just as we were about to turn the corner, Luna ran up and blocked our way. She stared at me, face pale, eyes bloodshot. "Nina," she said, her voice trembling, "are you satisfied now? My mom and I ended up like this because of you. Isn't that what you wanted?" "At least you're alive," I replied calmly. "That's already better than how my dad and I ended up in the last life." She froze, not understanding. The cab pulled away. Dad squeezed my hand. "Thank you for working so hard," he said quietly. "I'm glad we're not strangers anymore." I smiled and looked out at the passing lights. Yes. That was enough. We all make stupid choices when we're young. We believe sweet words and ignore people's actions. We mistake manipulation for care and take genuine love for granted. One day, after enough pain, you finally understand. The ones who truly love you aren't the ones who say it prettiest, but the ones who show up, who spend their time and money and sleepless nights on you without complaining. I've shelved my dream of becoming a singer and chasing idols, not forever, just for now. Dreams and reality were never as far apart as I once thought. I just chose to build a solid reality first, then chase my dreams from a place of strength. Don't get drunk on the beautiful part of youth and forget the bill you'll pay later. Here's to a youth with no regret, no surrender to fate, and no bowing our heads to time. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I really cherish every comment, thought, and bit of feedback you share. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Lumaryn Stories to support the channel. See you in the next story.